Welcome to The Current by TreasureCoast.com, where we discuss interesting people, places, and happenings on Florida's Treasure Coast.
So just
Right. Yeah, and that's an interesting topic too. And I guess we can kind of get in the intro just because we're
sure.
we're covering some topics that were kind of top of mind. But Mayor
Yeah.
Collins, I appreciate you being on. Thanks
Yes, sir. Yes,
for hopping
sir.
on to join us. And there's always you may have seen some of our um, episodes, but it's always nice to talk to representatives so that people get a bit more of an idea. I always say most people they get it from some headline or they see it on social media or there's people that start arguing over some social media post and it doesn't really paint the whole picture. So
Sure.
why don't you give an introduction to who you are, what you do, and maybe what originally inspired you to get involved with the city of Stewart?
My name is Christopher Collins. I've served on the Stewart City Commission for over 3 years now, going on 4 years. In December, I was appointed as the mayor. So we cycle through and there's a new mayor each year, generally. So I'm currently serving as the mayor. I originally got into this because I was frustrated with the overdevelopment. I was seeing all the apartments going up, and that felt very uncharacteristic, for why people come here, why I live here. And so I started to get involved politically and see what was going on, and then ultimately ran because I felt like we needed stronger leadership. We needed people with a backbone that would be willing to fight for how the average person, wants to live and how their quality of life and not having to deal with the traffic and just this endless surge of apartments was, antithetical to what Stewart is and Martin County is.
Yeah, it seems like there were, there's a lot of people that have varying views on this subject. And I know that
Mhm.
there's a lot of people who different things happen along the way that opened them up to want to be more involved, whether that was, you know, um, seeing certain developments go on, or whether that was, we had that summer where the water was just terrible. A lot of people's eyes really opened.
Yeah.
In your eyes, what's the biggest problem facing Stewart, and how has that changed since you've taken office? Because obviously a lot of things have come up. Maybe externalities with Martin County in general have are starting to play a role. So how do you look at all of those challenges?
In terms of what people care about here, I would say, development, slow growth, taxes, and then water. Those are sort of the three pillars that I think are most relevant, at least to me, and then talking to people. In terms of water, you're in a pretty good place right now, in that we've worked through LOSUM over that multi-year period. LOSUM is completed. We have a decent relationship as of right now with the Corps. The city of Stewart has an environmental attorney. There's a lot of good things happening with water. So you're not facing that 2016, 2018 threat of, algae floating down the
Right.
river, dogs getting sick, people getting sick. So water is constant vigilance. That's always going to take us being at Rivers Coalition meetings, being involved. As soon as you stop being involved, you're gonna have that again. So it's kind of constant vigilance, but it's being maintained, we'll say. Growth. In terms of growth and overdevelopment, you have, just for context, we were talking about why I got involved with this. You had, in the 4 years that preceded me getting elected, the city commission approved something like 3,000 apartments in a municipality that has historically 16, 17,000 people. That represented a dramatic increase in the population density, um, units per acre of people able to come into Martin County, into the city of Stewart. Your rationale for this was affordable housing. If we built
Mm,
apartments, somehow we would have affordable housing. We just need more units. We'll saturate the market with units, and this will, supply and demand will drive the unit price down. The opposite thing happened. So
right.
this is not a vacuum, right? And anybody from anywhere can come here. So you had people relocating from New York and New Jersey and Connecticut, people from down south, Fort Lauderdale, moving here. As soon as you create that unit and allow it to exist, now anyone from anywhere can come to the city of Stewart. So that's what happened. And in fact, where the market rate was lower pre all of these apartments coming online, and not all of them have yet. There's still the Costco apartments, that haven't come into reality yet. But where the market rates were lower, as soon as thousands of new two ones come online, guess what happens? At $2,000 and $2,500 and $3,000 a month, anybody that has a 2-1 for rent is going to chase that new market rate up. So we actually did that.
Right.
The counterintuitive thing happened is we created all these units and then drove up the local market rate. So plus really making the traffic worse for everybody at the same time. So
Man, that's such an interesting. The affordable housing thing to me is so interesting because my background's kind of in real estate, and it is so like the pressure
yeah,
is so on municipalities everywhere to have
yes,
affordable housing, and there's not these people instead of single family homes and things that maybe past generations were used to purchasing. Now it's like here's a townhome or here's another apartment building. Here's
right.
these things that it's kind of like the facade of affordable housing, but it doesn't really solve the problem. And I know some of it.
It solves a
How
problem.
does
It solves a problem is it's an asset for private equity and hedge funds.
sure
So you
yeah
create
and
these complexes, and now it can be traded and bought and sold. But the difference is the people that live here, the families, the middle class, they
right
don't have a place to own land and have any hedge against inflation and market rate increasing. So when all you do is bring online rentals, and you say affordable house, you're really creating products for as assets for investors.
right. And so what role does, because I know like you had mentioned some of this is in Martin County, um and maybe
It's
outside of city of
it's
Stewart
really the
limits.
state.
How right, yeah, so
Yeah.
that's kind of my question is how does all of this develop? I mean, and is there some sort of cooperation? Does the county come to you guys and say, hey, look, is there any sort of communication in that regard? And I've heard of some things from the state level as well, if you want
hmm
to touch on that.
You really need slow growth people in your municipal seats. This would be my opinion. Okay. You want hard line fighters that are going to be in these municipal seats. And that's really what's happened since COVID statewide. It's not a local only thing. You've had throughout the state slow growth candidates being elected. That has forced developers now that wanted land use changes and apartments and mixed use where there was otherwise cows, okay, to run to the state in Tallahassee and get your state legislators to do it for them. So now there's a lot of pressure coming from the state because those bills are being handed to your legislators from, I'm not going to mention names because I don't want to get sued, but larger scale developers
Sure, sure.
saying this is what we need you to do so we can bypass the municipalities. So what I anticipate happening is, if this cycle is anything like the last legislative cycle, you're going to start to see those slow growth city and county commissioners now running for state seats. Because if the only way to get things done, if you handcuff me and you make it to where I can't, implement the will of voters locally, then we have to now go to those state seats. And I think you're going to see the Florida legislature do what your local municipal seats did because they're passing legislation that subverts the ability. I'll give you an example so it's not hypothetical. In the city, we went through a moratorium. It's called a zoning in progress. We didn't take any new applications
Right.
for multifamily development. And we went back to our code to look at what happened. How did we get here? Well, what happened is in 2020, you had new comp plan changes, you had new code changes that were sent to the state by the commission at that time, i.e., Mike Meyer, Merritt Matheson, that crew, in the attempt to do affordable housing, updated our code to allow for lax parking requirements, to change what a unit was. I don't know if you caught wind of this, but they redefined a
Yeah, I
unit,
did.
a half unit.
Right.
Now it came into existence.
Yeah.
So where your code only allowed maximum with commission approval 30 units on an acre, maximum everything, you had to park it, everything had to work, and you could maybe get 30 units. With just one change of the pen, it was now 60. So they doubled our density even within conditional use. Just madness. See, this kind of stuff that people do
Right.
not want. They don't want that. And so
Right. Right.
we went back, we cleaned all of that up in our zoning in progress, and then we ended it and started taking new applications. Well, SB 180, the state legislative bill came through, and they,
Right.
and they
Yeah.
made They basically
Hmm.
any code change that could be perceived as more burdensome, which doesn't mean anything. It's a license to sue you. Then
Right.
anybody can sue over what could be considered more burdensome, and they made it retroactive to when we started our moratorium zoning in progress. So this kind of thing, where I can't deliver what I campaigned on and what people bought, if I'm a product or service, they bought me. I'm a private sector guy. I'm a chiropractor. So
Right.
I'm selling you a thing, right? I'm going to do this slow growth thing and I'm going to deliver. If I can't do that, if the state makes it impossible for what's the next step? Well, we got to go to Tallahassee then. I guess that's what we have to do. you know?
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
your
That
war
that
right now.
Yeah, and that I think touches really well on, I guess, what my thoughts were as far as like how it to accomplish something like that. There, I'm sure, are externalities. We've talked to representatives from the city where we've discussed, and I know traffic is a hot thing, but people from Martin County in general, even from Port St. Lucie coming to the beaches, and so many externalities and how you change it. And I guess the question is, from your mind,
Yes.
what does slow growth mean for people who are watching this and maybe they are in
Yes.
Stewart, maybe they're somewhere else on the Treasure Coast, and they know what slow growth means? We know, a lot of places on the Treasure Coast, they say, hey, look, we want to preserve the charm of our area, whatever that means.
Yes.
What does that mean to you, and how does that relate to maybe
So
zoning and land use,
this
like
is
you would
easy.
mention?
Yeah, this is easy, right? It gets really complicated, but it's simple. And I would say trust the plan, follow the plan. Whether it's the county or the city, a long time ago, we created comprehensive growth management plans. Every parcel in the city and in the county has already been zoned. It already has a land use. All of the planning went into making this thing. If you follow the plan, you're good. If you bought agricultural land,
Hmm.
you have ag land. If you bought institutional land, you have institutional land. This idea that you can convert anything to apartments is a nightmare.
Right, right.
If I get hyper, really zoom in, if you live in a single family home neighborhood, okay, you can't build a drug treatment center on your parcel because that's against the zoning and land use.
Right.
So that's not okay. You can't do that. That is also true on the larger map. Sorry, my phone's going. You might want to cut this out. I'm at the
No,
office.
no, it's all good. It's all good.
Forgive me.
No, it's all right, man. It happens.
Okay, so where was I? So you can't build a drug treatment center in your single family home neighborhood because of the zoning. But what we have been doing in the city is allowing where there's commercial property or industrial property, which is very valuable property, right? If you want to be able to have jobs producing um, square footage, right? In order for people to be able to afford to live here, you don't want to lose your industrial land where you could have high end marine or aerospace, like Hog Technologies is an example. Any of these types
Right.
of industrial uses allow for people to continue to live here, own a home, have a family. When you rezone that to apartments so that people from north and south can come work remotely, you start to create a bedroom community. And instead of serving your people here locally, you've just done the rezoning. In the county, their version of this, right, is you take agricultural land and you rezone that to Abacoa. So Newfield is a good example
Sure.
where you had one
Sure.
unit per 20 acres. Okay, so you got to get that in your mind. One home, one unit on 20 acres of land. They rezoned that area to nothing less than 30 units per 1 acre and up. That is a dramatic change in the density of human beings. So, if I had to categorize what slow growth is, it is maintaining your same amount of intensity of development. Keep your zoning and land use. If you have homes, continue to have homes there. If you have 10 units per acre, keep that 10 units. The idea of dramatically altering your land use and zoning, I would argue, because if you're in real estate, right, don't kill the golden goose. Martin County is unique. As soon as you turn it into everywhere else, it's not special anymore. That doesn't mean that you can't build anything here and everybody gets a no, But if the idea is you had to follow the rules in 1996, but this new guy over here from Miami, this new investor, he can build Abacoa over there. That's not fair. So following the comp plan, following land use keeps a level playing field. Everybody follows the rules and they work within it. Otherwise, these, you call them a PUD, these one-offs, these comp plan amendments in the county
Right.
are ripe for corruption. Okay, so if one guy gets the land use change and the other guy doesn't, this is encouraging more lawsuits. It's not good. So all that to say, follow the plan, keep the same density that you have in these different land uses, and make Martin County nicer, make it newer, not more dense. We don't want to be Winter Park. We don't want to be, Jacksonville. We are a
Right. Right.
certain
Right.
thing. And as we redevelop, if you maintain the density, it just becomes nicer whilst being the same thing. Which actually, if you're in real estate, if you can think long term, that protects the unique selling proposition, the uniqueness of Martin County, and will continue to have people want to be here and invest into it. And last point is, if you are in real estate, the worst thing you can do is flood the market with a bunch of apartments and create more volatility in the market here. So compared to Port St. Lucie and West Palm, our comprehensive growth management plan has historically kept us insulated and buffered from those dramatic shifts in the market, the huge rises and huge falls that you're now seeing in like Tampa, where they did a lot of this kind of development. They are facing huge crashes in prices. So if you want to modulate that and have a stable market that's healthy and a good tax base without doing the insanity, keep Martin County, keep the city of Stuart what it is in terms of density and intensity.
Yeah, I think and I appreciate that explanation, because I think that paints a pretty good line for people. I think sometimes people see things and they know when they feel like development has gone too far, or maybe they see things and they know, if it's on the serious end of the spectrum, it's very clear. I mean, I remember you had mentioned um, something about a previous change in land use, but I remember there was a big thing where they were going to sell the sailfish ball fields for apartments.
Right.
I mean,
That's right.
that's going back quite a bit. And or like people look at like
That's
CubeSmart
always a
on
threat,
US1, and
especially with Brightline. That's always a real threat. So those ball fields are sitting there. It's one of the things that we need to get accomplished is make sure that any development of those ball fields would have to go to referendum, because as soon as you have a Brightline station right there, that is just somebody's going to be trying to find a way to
right,
turn that into mixed use, transit oriented development. Or the
right,
county
right,
has in their long-term transportation plan, the county has a bus depot sitting next to a Brightline station.
yeah.
So there might be a lot of pressure to see that happen, which nobody wants that other than the county MPO. Nobody
So
wants a bus
what are
depot next to the middle school and in a historically black neighborhood, single family home neighborhood. It's not a good idea. Not next to parks and schools. It's not the way.
and I think that's a good kind of segue into the Brightline, because I mean it was a hot topic for a lot of people. I know a lot of people have discussed it. I know you've discussed it. We had Commissioner Reed on and talked with him about it. But I'm interested to hear from your point. Just Brightline, what happened? I know there was some initially, maybe something from the county that they hadn't
So I'll give
talked
you
to the
the
city about ahead of time. Or,
Yeah, I'll give you the quick Brightline breakdown. So there's the fantasy of Brightline, the shiny, I can get on, I can go down to Miami, I can go to a Heat game. There's the dream of Brightline, and then there's the reality of Brightline. The reality of Brightline logistically was we had a deal where Brightline was going to pay for half of that station. And when it came down to the 11th hour, they weren't going to pay for half of the station anymore. This was a huge problem because you're talking about a $60 million station. So what was about to happen if the city entered into that deal with Brightline is your city taxpayers, who are also county taxpayers, were about to be on the hook for $30 to $45 million, and your county taxpayers for $15 million, and Brightline paying $0. That's not okay. So the city said, we're not signing this deal. Bring us back a deal where Brightline pays half, because they should. That's the right thing to do here. That would be fair. They need to have skin in the game. Well, they ran to the county Okay, and they'd worked out a unilateral deal where the county would still pay 15, and then taxpayers at large through federal grants, which they're currently waiting on, would pay the 45 difference. There are other logistical issues with the station. Again, fantasy versus reality is, where are all the people going to park from the courthouse? So this is set to be put in the courthouse parking lot. Okay, so behind Ernst and Produce and next to the lumber yard there, that's where all the people, the staff that work at the courthouse, they park. If the entire parking lot is now for Brightline, where do all of those 130 cars park? They're going to be on street. Well, the on-street parking there has already been apportioned out to previous development that we've approved. So it really would create a traffic nightmare and parking nightmare if we were to approve that, if they're not going to build a garage on that site.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Current by treasurecoast.com. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Follow us on social media or visit treasurecoast.com for local events, tips, and news. Have a guest or topic you'd love to hear on the show? Let us know at treasurecoast.com. Until next time, keep riding the current and enjoying everything the Treasure Coast has